After teaching in the classroom for 20 years, I've learned a few things along the way. And today I'm sharing some of that hard-earned advice, but it's not your typical advice. Some might call these my unpopular opinions. If you're new here, I'm Rachel Vincent, and I love sharing ways to help teachers simplify their classroom and their teaching. And if you've been in the classroom for any amount of time in the last 4 years, you know that things have changed. But honestly, things have changed a lot over the last 20 years. When I sat down to think about what I was going to share in this video, I really began to think that, you know, we say kids have changed, but kids are kids and they haven't changed all that much. There has been a cultural change in the use of phones, in how much access students have to things. What has changed is students know way too much. They know so much more than they ever did when I was a kid, or even just 20 years ago when I first started teaching. They have access to so much information that has changed. And in effect, I think it has affected them as humans. But kids are still kids. Teaching hasn't changed that much. There is a lot of more requirements of us. There's a lot more pressure on us. I think we as teachers as a whole have realized that we are not going to allow this job to consume us. So we are trying to have a better work-life balance. A lot of teachers are realizing this is not what I want. So they're leaving. So things like that have changed. Parents have changed for sure. I think that's probably the biggest change. But overall, I still enjoy being a teacher for the most part, but that changes every year too. That changes during different time periods of the year because some parts of the year are more stressful than the other. It changes with classes and behavior dynamics. Do I know if I am going to retire as a teacher and stick through it or leave the classroom before then? I can't give that answer because honestly, I'm allowing myself to be open to whatever. Even though this is my 21st year teaching, it's not on paper as far as retirement goes. So I'm actually about 3.5 years behind that on paper. So it would be 3.5 extra years when I reach 28 or 30. I don't even know what the retirement year number is. I don't know what the future holds, but that's not why you're here to know what my plans are in the future. You are here to get that unpopular opinion advice. I'm a little bit nervous about this video because these are unpopular opinions and people might say things, but you know what? I feel like I wish somebody would have actually told me this a while ago and I could have had less worries. The first one is small group time or independent work time. Both, I guess. I don't do small groups every single day. And if you're from my district, you're gonna cover your ears. It honestly changes every day. I don't have a set schedule. I think if I taught the younger grades and they needed that one-on-one, more explicit instruction, I probably would. And when I taught second grade, although those were my beginning of the years of teaching, I did do that. And I think if I taught younger grades, I would. But the older grades, I just haven't found the need to meet with them as often. Now, when it comes to math, I teach in small groups, but it's like large small groups. I actually split my class for almost every lesson. I pull my students who know math very well, who get math quickly, and we go through the lesson. They can get it with 1 to 2 practices, and then they can go off on their own. And then I pull my next group who need more guided practice with me. And so we take longer to go through it. We go through step by step by step with all. And that's how I tackle math. With reading, I pull kids who need additional support, who are my real struggling readers, quite honestly. The way our standards work with reading is we hit it so many times that I don't necessarily always need to pull a small group to work on a skill. And so often what I do during that time is I get other work done. I grade papers, I maybe create slides, I file papers. I do some of that during our quote-unquote small group time. Not every time, but a good chunk of time. But it's not just like I send them off working and I ignore them and I get my work done. That's not the case at all. I have students at my desk working. And the way we do must do, may do during our ELA block is they're working through a list of things. And then if I'm not pulling kids to work with, there are kids at my desk working independently, working on their must-do, may-do list, and I'm helping them through that. I'm helping them with their work. And I help them individually. I don't help them like, it's not, okay, my small group of kids come here. Now I do pull some, I do it sometimes. I'm not saying I don't ever do it, but I do get work done while they're working independently. I'm not always helping them through things. Sometimes there needs to be that productive struggle where they need to try it on their own, and then I help them. And while they're getting started and doing the things, I'm doing some of my to-do list. Because at the end of the day, I feel if they're not gonna pay me overtime, then I'm gonna do work when they do pay me. I feel like if I start to get blotchy, it's because I'm feeling a little nervous about my unpopular opinions. But my next one is about test scores. I know that I'm not gonna have the highest test scores. Like, I know I'm not. And I actually came to that understanding years ago. I actually told a teacher recently, I said, you can either have really good test scores, but the cost of that is working them to the bone, especially with the expectations and the kinds of test questions and things that they like, just working and working and working them to where they don't enjoy school. So you can have that and get those really high test scores, or you can find a better balance and kids can enjoy learning while still working hard, but your test scores aren't going to be the highest. Now, mine aren't the lowest because I do the work to help them be successful on that test, but I'm never going to have like these outstanding test scores. For the longest time, I struggled with the whole like narrative of kids are more than a test score. One test score shouldn't, reflect the whole child and all this, but then everything else at school was all about the test scores. And it still is. And that is one of the many things wrong with our education system. And so I had to make the decision as a teacher that I want to live the narrative of students are more than a test score, that test scores don't define me, because everything at school is telling me it's all about those test scores. It's all about the numbers. I want my students to grow, and my students do grow. They make growth, they make improvement, but they are not going to be these unrealistic goals that states and districts and principals set on us. I'm just going to be realistic about it, and I'm going to help my students grow, and my students do grow. So when I say I don't have the highest test scores, it doesn't mean my students aren't learning and aren't growing. It's just different than what the school system expects of my students. But I will tell you, my students love my class. My students most days enjoy coming to school. We have a good time, we enjoy, we learn, but that they're 10 years old and they are going to live in a world full of requirements, and I'm going to allow them to be children and not stress that my test scores are bad. Do I hate when they project your test scores for the whole school to see and I'm not at the top? Of course I hate that. Of course I hate it if they're not meeting goals that I want them to meet, or they're not showing growth, but test scores don't define me, and I live by that. This next is, I don't think it's really an unpopular opinion. It's just something that I noticed that a lot of people still struggle with, and that is saying no. I would like to thank my mom. If you're watching, Mom, thanks, because you really instilled this in me as a little girl, but it is something that is hard to do face to face, especially as more of a people pleaser. Saying no to somebody's face is very difficult, for me at least. And so what I do is I try to give a non-answer, like, let me check my schedule, I'll get back to you, or I'm not sure I can, to their face. Because in an email, I can say no all day long, but to their face it's harder. So I try to go that route just to make it easier on myself, and then I'll email them later and tell them no. One of the things that's even harder than saying no is saying no with no explanation. You do not have to explain to somebody why you're saying no. You do not have to tell them, I'm busy, I have this other thing. And I found that as a person who does not have children, who does not have a family, well, I have a family, but you know what I mean? Like, it's people who have kids and husbands and things like that have an easy no. They're like, oh, I can't, my kid has whatever. And so a lot of times things would follow me because I didn't have those. But then I realized, well, just because I don't have kids doesn't mean I have to do all the things. So I've just learned to say no without an explanation. I just say no. And so many times what I do add, because it's hard to just say no, I say, I can't add anything else to my plate right now. I can't add anything else to my schedule right now. Because truthfully, there are some things that I would say yes to, but I know that I'm trying to limit my time at school. And then there's some things that I'm just like, nope, I'm not doing that. That does not sound fun. There's no way. And I just say, no thanks, or I can't commit to that. And I don't give a reason. It's harder to do than say. And I feel like after 21 years, I've gotten pretty good at it. This unpopular opinion, I think it's like a 50-50 unpopular. Like half the people are good with it and half the people are not. And that's planning ahead. For some reason, people feel that you cannot plan ahead because you don't know what your kids need in the moment. And I'm like, while that's true, our standards are the same. We're still required to teach them in 180 days or more, depending on how many days your school has. You can still plan ahead. I plan ahead and I plan weeks ahead. And regardless of where my kids are, I still follow that for the most part. Now, there are times when like math, you know, there's a test coming up and I'm like, you know what, we need another day. So I push it back a day. And so, but that doesn't like change everything. It changes just my math lesson. And if I push it back a day, I've got to find a place where I can catch up because we have 180 days and testing is coming. And so I don't know why there's this whole thing of we can't plan ahead because we don't know what our kids are going to need. If you've been teaching the same grade for a while and the same standards for a while, you pretty much know where the kids are going to struggle, where you're going to need to have those extra days. And that's what I use small groups for. Now, I know I just said I don't do small groups all the time, which I don't, but when I do small groups, I am pulling the kids who struggled with a standard that I can't spend a whole nother day teaching because I'm moving on, but I need them to spend another day. So I'm pulling them in small group and we're teaching another lesson of rounding. That's where I stand on. I think planning ahead is helpful. I like planning. I batch plan. I knock out as much as I can. It saves me time. Plans typically stay the same year to year unless your curriculum or standards change. And I don't think there's anything wrong with redoing the same thing. If it works, keep doing it. Don't reinvent the wheel is what everyone says. So let's practice what we preach. And I feel like I'm coming across a little mean, and I'm not meaning that to you. It's really a lot to, I guess, people outside the classroom, those lovely people who have the degrees but not the experience. That's another popular opinion. I think experience is more important than degrees. Okay, my next one is you cannot reach all kids. You should try. Like, I'm not saying give up on children, absolutely not, but you cannot reach them all. There are some kids who don't want to be reached. There are some families who send their kids to school because they have to, because they need that free babysitting, but they are not expecting their child to do well. And it's sad, and I wish I could help, but there are some kids, no matter what you do, you cannot reach them. You cannot get them to do the work. You cannot get them to want to learn. Does that mean I give up on the kids? Absolutely not. I had a student who did very little work, who came to school when he wanted to, and the family supported that, and there was nothing I could say to the parent or the student that was going to change that. And it was sad, but that is the reality. And while my goal is to reach them all, I have to be okay with knowing that I can't reach everyone. And on top of that, I have to also know that kids are going to learn in spite of what I do, in spite of having the most engaging lesson or doing room transformations, or even when I show up and I'm just having an off day. Kids are gonna learn. Kids are curious by nature. They may not learn according to some unrealistic standards that many of our states have, but kids are gonna learn. And so even those years that you have a really tough year, whether it's something you're dealing with personally or whether it's at school, your group of students that year, your kids are gonna learn when you are not your best. Most kids will learn when they're not their best, and it's still part of our job to try our best. I'm not saying we could just give up and throw a couple worksheets at them and they're gonna learn. That's not what I'm saying at all with this, but I think it's a way to like take some of that pressure off myself. Kids will learn. And some years, no matter how good you are at classroom management, even if you think it's one of your strengths, those classroom management systems and things don't work. There are some years where the group of students you will have years as a teacher where every trick in the book won't work, where that group of students will try you no matter what. It will happen. And if it hasn't happened yet, it will happen. And if you're lucky, like I am, you only have a few years out of your career. I can name in my 21 years, 3 years that really tried me as a teacher, where I questioned if this was for me, if teaching was for me. And one happened towards the very beginning, one happened in the middle, and one has happened recently. As hard as that year was, and I don't ever want to repeat it again, it does make you a better teacher. It does make you question if teaching is for you, and if it's not, then it's not. And there will come a time teaching won't be for me. But just know those years happen. But also the wonderful thing about teaching is it only lasts a year, and then you get to do it again. You get to try a different school, try a different district, try a different grade level, have a new batch of kids. Like, that's the nice thing about teaching, that each year you can try for something better. That's the good thing about teaching. The last thing I'm going to leave you with is that, because I hope this is not coming across negative, because I'm not wanting to come across negative. I'm wanting to come across realistic, and maybe hopeful that you don't have to try and reach this unrealistic goal of being this amazing teacher, because teaching is an important job, but it is still a job. Life is too short for us to be miserable in our job. If we're miserable, it's time to look elsewhere. I love teaching. I really do. I love being a teacher. I love kids. I love teaching them and helping them. I don't love all the crap that comes with teaching. We are in a broken system in education in America, and I don't know how that's going to be fixed. I don't know if it will be fixed in my lifetime. So I have to remember that at the end of the day, teaching is still a job. And if somebody came to me and said, I can give you your same salary or more, I would take more. I'm not going to take less to come do this job that has less stress and consumes less of your life. I would probably take it in a heartbeat. And that's how I know it's a job. Do I think I've been called to teaching? 100%. I have wanted to be a teacher ever since I was a little girl. I played school with my dolls and my brother and any neighborhood kids that wanted to. I loved everything about school as a kid. That's all I ever wanted to do. I have loved teaching. I still love teaching, but I know there's more to life than teaching. My hope and prayer is that this hasn't discouraged anyone from teaching. It's just helped you see a realistic side of teaching. And for someone who's been in the classroom for 20 years and is still in the classroom today, that it is possible to be okay in the classroom, but you gotta know some of those unpopular opinion advice in order to survive. Now, if you'd like some practical advice on how to leave work on time that's less unpopular opinion, check out the video that's on your screen now.